You've seen the name 1,000 times without thinking about it. It's stamped on the side of a Dodge Ram idling at a gas station. It's bolted to the front of the semis hauling freight down every interstate in the country. Cummins, a Fortune 500 company that pulled in $34 billion last year and builds engines in 190 countries. The name is everywhere. But the man it belongs to died 2,000 miles from the company he built, alone in a basement workshop in California. So here's the question nobody asks when they see that badge. If Clessie Cummins founded the company, designed the engines, set the world records, and put his own name on the building, how did he end up on the outside, pushed out of his own empire? The easy answer is that he was just a mechanic who got outmanaged by smarter men in suits. And that answer isn't wrong, but it isn't close to the whole story. Because the thing Clessie Cummins built after they pushed him out, the invention he made as a forgotten old man in that basement, you have heard it hundreds of times. On the highway, in traffic, probably this week, you just never knew his name was on that too. This has 3 parts, and most people never get past the first one. But let's start with what everyone gets wrong. The company that carries the name Cummins was never really Clessie Cummins' company. Not the way you'd assume. When he founded it in February of 1919, he was a 30-year-old farm kid from Columbus, Indiana, with an 8th grade education and a feel for machines that bordered on obsession. He'd built a working steam engine at 11, his first automobile engine and all at 16. But genius doesn't pay for a factory. The money came from a banker named William Irwin, a wealthy man Clessie had worked for since 1908, first as his chauffeur, then as the only mechanic alive who could keep Irwin's Packard running. Irwin put up the capital. Irwin held the control. And from the first day, that arrangement meant the man whose name was on the door didn't actually own the room. Here's what that looked like in practice. The first engine Cummins built was not even his own design. It was licensed from another inventor, a 6-horsepower farm motor sold through Sears. Sears called the engines defective and killed the contract. Irwin had to step in and bail out his own former chauffeur, handing over $10,000 just to fix the first flaw. But that was only the start of the bleeding. Over the next 18 years, the Irwin family poured more than $2.5 million into a company that did not turn a single dollar of profit. 18 years. Sit with what that takes. Every year the books came back red, and every year the money kept coming, because Clessie kept doing the one thing he was better at than almost anyone breathing. He made people believe. When the bank threatened to liquidate the whole operation around 1929, he did not write a memo or beg for patience. He bolted a diesel engine into a used Packard limousine and, on Christmas Day, drove his nervous banker through the streets of Columbus in America's first diesel-powered car. Then he drove that same car 800 miles to the New York Auto Show on $1.38 of fuel. The stunts worked. The money kept flowing. But every one of those desperate publicity runs was quietly setting up a single moment on a California mountain road, a moment that would nearly kill him. And that near death is the real story. In August of 1931, Clessie set out to prove a diesel truck could cross the entire country. He and 2 companions climbed into a Cummins-powered truck fitted with bunks, storage, and a stove, the first rolling sleeper of its kind, and pointed it from New York to Los Angeles. 3,214 miles. Total fuel cost, $11.22. It was a triumph right up until the 5th day, when it nearly became a funeral. They reached the top of the Cajon Pass, almost 3,800 feet up, on a steep stretch of old Route 66, outside San Bernardino. Clessie was at the wheel, and as the heavy truck started down the grade, the brakes began to fade, and then they were simply gone. No brakes. A loaded truck gathering speed down a mountain with nothing to stop it. And at the bottom of the hill, crossing the road directly in front of them, a train. He wrenched it into a lower gear, cut the fuel, and pumped water into the cylinders by hand to choke the engine down, wrestling the truck the entire way. As the story goes, he cleared the tracks by almost nothing, missing the caboose by a breath. He survived. But something about that helpless plunge, an engine that could go but could not stop, lodged itself in his brain and refused to leave for the next 24 years. Hold on to that picture of the runaway truck, because it connects directly to a sound you've heard on the highway, and I'm going to show you exactly why. While Clessie was out risking his neck for headlines, something quieter was happening back in Indiana. In 1934, a polished young man arrived at the company, Irwin's great-nephew, fresh from Yale and Oxford, just 25 years old. His name was J. Irwin Miller, and he was everything Clessie wasn't. Where Clessie wanted to build things and break records, Miller wanted to build an organization. He swapped the hand tools for real production lines. He stitched together a national network of distributors. He pushed research so hard the company would deliberately obsolete its own products to stay ahead. And it worked. In 1937, 18 years in, Cummins finally turned its first profit. But the more the company succeeded, the less it needed the showman who'd kept it alive. And that's where the empire began slipping out of his hands. The takeover didn't come with a knife. It came with a calendar. Miller became president in 1945, then chairman of the board in 1951, and with every title he collected, Clessie's real authority shrank a little more. Remember, he never owned the company. The Irwin family always had. So as the professional managers and money men filled the offices, the founder slowly ran out of things to do in the building that bore his name. The people who were there described the problem without much drama. Clessie just wanted to try things, to make things, to chase the next idea down. He was an inventor. The company he had founded had grown into something that ran on administrators, and an administrator was the one thing Clessie would never be. Therefore, the two could not share the same house. In 1955, Clessie Cummins stepped down as chairman and walked away from the Cummins Engine Company for good. He packed up and moved to California, about as far from Columbus, Indiana, as you can get and still be in the country. And here's the cruel arithmetic of the timing. The moment he left was almost exactly the moment the company detonated. Under Miller, sales climbed from $20 million in 1946 to more than $100 million within a decade. In 1956, Cummins opened its first plant overseas, in Scotland. By 1967, the company Clessie founded controlled roughly half of the entire diesel engine market in America. The empire finally became an empire. Billions of dollars. Tens of thousands of workers. Engines turning in nearly every country on the map. And the man whose name was bolted to every one of those engines wasn't there to see a minute of it. He was 3,000 miles away, a retired old man tinkering in a basement in Sausalito, treated by most of the world as a chapter that had already closed. That should have been the end. A founder outgrown by his own creation, fading into a quiet California retirement. But Clessie Cummins was about to do the single most important thing of his entire life. And he was going to do it at 67 years old, nearly alone, with the memory of that runaway truck still burning a hole in the back of his mind. What he built next should change how you look at every truck on the road. In that basement in Sausalito, Clessie went back to 1931. He had spent 24 years unable to shake the feeling of a truck that could speed up but could not slow down. And now, finally, he had the time to solve it. Working with his son, Lyle, a trained mechanical engineer, he landed on something almost poetic. What if you could turn the engine itself into the brake? What if, heading down a mountain, you flip the engine from a machine that makes power into one that swallows it, cracking the cylinders open at the top of compression so all that built-up energy blows out the exhaust instead of shoving the truck forward. He had it. A compression release engine brake. The exact thing that would have saved his life on the Cajon Pass. And now, we reach the most painful irony in the entire story. Clessie was contractually required to offer the invention first to the Cummins Engine Company, the company he had founded with his own hands. They turned him down. They rejected it as too commercially risky. The empire, wearing his name, looked at his greatest safety invention and said no. So did companies in Indiana and Michigan, until a maker of drill chucks in Connecticut, the Jacobs Manufacturing Company, agreed to build it. They nicknamed it after themselves, the Jake Brake. The first unit shipped in 1961, and from there, it spread onto nearly every heavy diesel truck in America. More than 10 million of them sold to this day. So here's the thing I promised you back at the very beginning. You have heard this man's invention, that loud, rattling machine gun roar a big rig makes when it is hauling itself down a hill or an off-ramp. That hammering bray so harsh that whole towns put up signs begging truckers not to use it. Those no engine braking signs you have driven past your entire life. That is the sound of Clessie Cummins. So here is where you actually land. You looked at that Cummins badge and saw a Fortune 500 giant, a name on the side of a truck. But what you were actually looking at was a farm kid with an 8th grade education, 18 straight years of losses, a banker's family that owned everything, a near-fatal plunge down a mountain in 1931, a quiet takeover that emptied the founder out of his own house, and an old man in a California basement who answered the company that discarded him with the most recognizable sound on the American highway. They pushed him out of his empire. Therefore, he built a second one they could never touch, one you hear every single day. And the final twist lands harder than any of it. In 2022, Cummins bought the Jacobs Company outright, which means the engine brake they once rejected now belongs at last to the company Clessie founded. His invention finally came home. He just was not alive to see it. So the next time a truck comes hammering down an off-ramp with that ugly, beautiful roar, you will know whose voice that really is. And if you think being erased from your own company is strange, wait until you hear about the man who invented the diesel engine in the first place. Rudolf Diesel walked onto a steamship one night in 1913, vanished over the side, and his body was never found.